There are two kinds of betrayal. The first is when someone you trust does something behind your back. The second is when they do it to your face, every day, for years, and you don't see it because you're looking up at them, because they made sure you'd always be looking up. My name is Rachel. I'm 44. I'm an architect. I own my own firm, 12 employees, 3 federal contracts, and an office overlooking the river. I design buildings that stand for decades. I know how to read blueprints, find weak points in structures, and predict exactly where a crack will appear if the foundation was laid wrong. But I couldn't see my own house. 18 years of marriage. 3 kids. Ethan, the oldest, 16, already taller than me by half a head, already wearing that teenage expression that makes you want to hug him and shake him at the same time. Sophie, 13. My face, but her father's temperament. Quiet, precise, always ready with an answer. It used to charm me. And Ben, my youngest, 9 years old, the only person in our house who hugs for no reason at all. Mark, my husband. Corporate lawyer. 46 years of perfect haircuts, perfect suits, and perfectly constructed arguments. A man who never raises his voice. Never, because he doesn't need to. But I do. I always have. I'm loud. I gesture when I talk, cry at movies, yell at contractors, laugh so hard that people turn around in restaurants. Mark always said it with a smile. That's my Rachel, Hurricane Rachel. And I took it as a compliment. For 18 years, I took it as a compliment. Now I know he wasn't describing me, he was documenting me. But before this now, there was one specific Tuesday. An ordinary, unremarkable workday. I was on site at a new federal courthouse, 4th floor, bare concrete walls, no windows yet. My phone was in my jacket pocket. When I pulled it out, there was a missed call from Mark and a voicemail. A long one, over 4 minutes. Probably a pocket dial, I thought. Engine noise and radio static. I even smiled. Plugged in my earbuds, pressed play. At first just noise, a car door slamming, rustling, then Mark's voice. Clear, calm, professional. No, I need this to be ironclad. Full custody. I'm not willing to risk joint custody. She's unstable and I can prove it. My fingers stopped working. My legs too. I just stood there on that unfinished 4th floor, listening to my husband calmly discuss how he was going to take my children away from me. There were 3 more minutes after that. A lawyer's name. A retainer amount. The phrase, I've been documenting her reactions for over a year. And the worst part, a laugh. Short, light. As if he were talking about a furniture supply contract, not the end of my life. When the recording ended, I sat down on the concrete floor. My knees just folded. Around me, gray walls without windows, rebar sticking out of the ceiling, and somewhere below, a drill whining. I sat there and thought, here's the irony. I build buildings, and mine is collapsing, and I'm sitting in the middle of someone else's construction site on a cold floor, and I don't have a blueprint. No, that's not true. There was a blueprint, Mark's. He'd been drafting it for a year. Just without me, I sat on that floor for 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Time does strange things when the ground disappears. Then someone below shouted my name, the foreman, I think, and I got up. Brushed off my jeans, wiped my face. Turned out I'd been crying. Hadn't noticed. Downstairs, I told the foreman I was leaving early, something about a migraine. He nodded. In the car, I closed the door and did what every normal person does after their world flips upside down. I turned on the heated seat, buckled my seatbelt, checked my mirrors, as if getting the small things right could make the big thing fall into place. The first instinct was to call my mom. The second, my friend Jess. The third, to dial Mark and scream. I didn't do any of them. Because somewhere between the parking lot and the highway on-ramp, a different mode switched on. The one I use at work when there's a problem. When a contractor screws up, when deadlines are burning, when a client threatens to sue. I don't panic, I calculate. Instead of going home, I drove to my office. It was almost 6, everyone had left. I locked my door, pulled out a notebook, a regular paper one, the kind I sketch in by hand when I'm thinking, and started writing. Not feelings. Facts. Mark was talking to a lawyer, not a friend, not a colleague over a beer. A lawyer he was paying. That meant the process was already in motion. A retainer had been paid. These weren't thoughts out loud. This was a project, he said, documenting her reactions for over a year. A year. I started thinking back. That fight in November when I snapped because he was late to Sophie's school play. The evening before Christmas when I broke down from exhaustion and he said, so gently, Rachel, you need help. I'm serious. That moment in January when I raised my voice at Ben over a broken plate and then spent 30 minutes apologizing while Mark stood in the doorway. Just watching. He wasn't comforting. He was recording. In the notebook, I listed 7 episodes from the past year where I'd lost it. 7, and next to each one, what Mark had done. In all 7 cases, the same pattern. He came home late, or forgot something important, or said something that made my stomach clench. I reacted, and he observed. Here's the thing, I'm an architect. Every day I look at structures and determine, is this crack random or systemic? Is this foundation settling due to time or a design flaw? 7 identical cracks in the same locations. That's not coincidence. That's built into the blueprint. He wasn't just documenting my breakdowns. He was engineering them. I closed the notebook. My hands had stopped shaking. I was scared, but it was a different kind of fear. Not blind, sharp. Like spotting a flaw in a drawing and knowing that if you don't fix it now, the building comes down. Only the building was my life, and my children. I opened a new page and wrote at the top, Project Countermeasures. And below, first item, find a lawyer, not his level. Better, that night I lay next to Mark, listening to him breathe, even, calm, like a man with a clean conscience, and thought, you're sleeping next to the woman you're planning to destroy, and you're comfortable. Morning came as usual. Oatmeal, waffles, coffee, a kiss on the top of my head, phone in hand. He even asked about the site. Fine, I said, had a migraine yesterday, left early. He nodded. You need to rest more, Rachel. You take on too much. Before, I would have heard concern. Now I heard an entry in a future court filing. My wife repeatedly complained of migraines and exhaustion. I expressed concern. After he left, I waited 10 minutes. Then I called Diane, not a close friend, a professional one. We'd worked together on a school project 2 years back. Her husband had gone through a development rights dispute. I remembered her mentioning a lawyer. Not family law exactly, but someone from that world where people know people. I didn't explain details, just said I needed a family law attorney. The best. Diane went quiet for a second, then said, Ellen Park. I'll give you her number, tell her I sent you. Then she added, Rachel, are you okay? I said yes. That was the first deliberate lie in my new life, not the last. Ellen's office wasn't downtown. It sat in a quiet 2-story building on the outskirts. Good building, actually. Pre-war brick, new roof, expensive, but not flashy. She'd chosen this building as a message, I thought. Seriousness without spectacle. I hadn't said a word yet, and already I felt calmer. Ellen was a woman in her mid-50s. Short hair, glasses in thin frames, not a single unnecessary piece of jewelry. She sat me down, poured water, and said, Tell me. From the beginning, if you can. If you can't, start wherever you need. So I told her, the voicemail, the 4 minutes. Ironclad and documenting for over a year. The 7 episodes in my notebook, the pattern. Ellen listened without interrupting. No sympathetic nods. No, I'm so sorry. She just listened the way an engineer listens when someone describes a structural problem. When I finished, she took off her glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. "What you're describing is a known tactic," she said. "It's called manufactured evidence of instability. One spouse systematically creates conditions that provoke emotional reactions in the other, then documents those reactions as evidence of instability." She paused. "It's not rare, especially among lawyers. No drama, just a diagnosis. And somehow that made it both easier and more terrifying. Easier because it had a name. More terrifying because if it had a name, it was a real strategy that actually worked. Had worked on other women. His mistake," she continued, "is that voicemail. He doesn't know you heard it. That's your one advantage, and we can't lose it." She opened her notebook. The same gesture I'd made the night before, two people with notebooks making plans. Only now I wasn't alone. "First, don't change your behavior at home. At all, he's expecting your reactions. Don't give them to him." She looked at me. "Second, save that voicemail in 3 places. Cloud, flash drive, email it to yourself." Another pause. "Third, I need a list of every financial asset you know about, accounts, property, investments." "And fourth," I asked. "Fourth, and this is the most important, don't tell the children." "Not yet. He will use any instability in the household." "Any," I nodded. "Thought about Ben, who hugs for no reason. About Sophie, who looks so much like her father. About Ethan, who at 16 thinks he knows how the world works." I left Ellen's office 90 minutes later. I had a plan, not a finished one, a foundation. First lines on a blueprint. But for the first time in 24 hours, I felt something solid under my feet. In the parking lot, I checked my phone. A message from Mark. "Can you pick up Ben today? Got a meeting till 7. A meeting. Interesting. With whom? I wrote back, "Of course. No problem. Period." Not an exclamation point, not a heart emoji. A period, small detail, but I had started counting details. That Saturday, everyone left the house. Mark took Ben to baseball, Ethan was at a friend's, Sophie at a classmate's birthday party. I was alone. For the first time since that Tuesday. For the first time with my eyes open. I stood in the middle of the living room and looked at my house the way I'd look at a building before a purchase inspection. Walls the same. Furniture the same. Wedding photo on the mantle, same as always. But I didn't live here anymore. I was conducting an assessment. And that's when I saw it. A small white camera on the bookshelf between a Steinbeck paperback and a framed photo of Ben. I'd walked past it 100 times. 1,000. It had been there 5 months. Mark installed it in June, after those break-ins in the neighboring block. "For security, Ratch, everyone's getting them. I'll set it up, you don't need to do anything." At the time, I was even glad. Thought he was being protective. Now I stood there and the camera stared back. A black lens the size of a pea, aimed at the couch and the kitchen area. Meaning, aimed exactly where I sit in the evenings, where I talk on the phone, where I sometimes cry from exhaustion, where I yell at the kids when the day has been too long and my patience ran out somewhere between the 3rd meeting and the 4th load of dishes. He was filming me, not for security, for the case, for his lawyer, for a judge who would one day watch those recordings and see a woman who screams, cries, loses control. No context, no cause, just an unstable mother. I wanted to rip that camera off the wall, hurl it to the floor, crush it under my heel. Instead, I took a step back, then another, moved out of the frame, and started thinking. If I touch the camera, he'll know. If he knows, he'll understand that I know. And my one advantage, that accidental voicemail, disappears. Ellen said, "Don't give him your reactions." The camera is a trap for reactions, so the camera is part of the plan. I took out my phone and photographed it. Angle, direction, model. Then I walked through the house. slowly, room by room, like I do on a site when I'm looking for defects. Bedroom, nothing. Kids' rooms, nothing, and I could breathe a little easier. At least he wasn't filming them. My home office, the small room next to the laundry where I work evenings, nothing visible. But I wasn't sure. Cameras are tiny these days. I texted Ellen. Brief. Found a camera in the living room, installed by husband 5 months ago. Pretext of security, aimed at the area where I spend my evenings. What do I do? The answer came in under a minute. One sentence. Don't touch it, now it works for you. I read it twice. Then I understood what she meant. The camera records. Let it record. Let it record a woman who calmly cooks dinner, patiently helps with homework, never raises her voice. Day after day. Week after week. And then, when it goes to court, Mark will present his footage. And the judge won't see an unstable mother. The judge will see a normal woman. And the question, why was her husband secretly filming a normal woman? That question will be very hard for Mark to answer. He built a trap, and I was going to live inside it. Calmly, carefully, perfectly, until the trap closed on him. The first week was almost easy. I knew the rules: don't react, don't break, be steady, calm, predictable. The camera is rolling, let it roll. There was even a kind of dark satisfaction in it, like being an actress in a film, and only you know that the ending flips everything. By the second week, Mark started getting restless. He didn't show it, he never shows anything, but I'd learned to read him differently. Before, I looked at my husband. Now I looked at a structure, and the structure was showing hairline cracks. He started coming home later. Not dramatically, 20 minutes, half an hour. Before, I would have asked. He would have said something about traffic, I would have said fine, and something inside me would have stung. Now I just said, dinner's in the oven. No questions, no glance. And I could see it throw him off, barely noticeable. A half-second pause before answering, just slightly longer than usual. Then came the forgotten promises. He was supposed to pick up Ben from practice on Tuesday. Didn't. Called and said, damn, meeting ran long. Can you? I said, of course. Calm, no reproach. Thursday, he forgot Sophie's parent-teacher conference. I went alone, came back, he didn't even ask how it went. Before, I would have said something. Not a fight, just, Mark, we agreed. And he would have answered gently, patiently, the way you talk to a child. Rachel, I apologized, don't blow this up. And I would have felt guilty for being upset, like always. But I stayed quiet, and that scared him more than any shouting could. By the third week, he shifted tactics, something subtler. I might have even admired it if I didn't want to kill him. It happened on a Saturday evening. The kids were home. 4 of us at the dinner table. Ethan was eating at a friend's. Sophie was telling us about her biology project, something about cell division, and I was listening, asking questions. A normal family dinner. The camera on the shelf filmed our backs. Then Mark said, casually, between bites, by the way, I ran into Jim Henderson today. He mentioned your courthouse project is 3 weeks behind schedule. That true? Jim Henderson, my client. The one commissioning the federal courthouse. Mark knew him through the golf club, but Mark had never discussed my work with my clients before. Never. Something hot rose inside me, not anger, rage. He had reached into my work, my firm. The one place where I am myself, without him, without his rules, without his control. Sophie was watching me. Ben was pushing peas around his plate with a fork. The camera in the living room was aimed at the couch area, but the kitchen sat on the edge of its range. I wasn't sure if it caught audio. I set down my fork, slowly, looked at Mark. Jim exaggerates a little, we're on schedule. There were rebar delivery delays, but I resolved that last week. Steady voice, calm. Like I was talking to a contractor in a meeting. Mark had been expecting something else. I saw it in his eyes, a flash of disappointment, hidden behind a nod. Well, good. Jim just seemed concerned. I thought maybe you could use some help. You've been looking tired lately. There it was. Tired. Could use some help. In front of the children. In front of Sophie, who absorbs every word and remembers everything. Before, I would have exploded. I'm not tired, my work is fine, stay out of my business. My voice would have risen. Sophie would have looked down at her plate. Ben would have left the table. And Mark would have sat there with his expression of calm regret. And somewhere in his phone, a new note, Saturday dinner. Rachel became aggressive in front of the children, hostile reaction to an expression of concern. But I didn't explode, I smiled. Thanks for worrying. But really, everything's fine. Sophie, so what was that about cell division? You said they split into 2 or 4, clean redirect. Sophie brightened up and kept talking. Ben lost interest and went back to his peas. And Mark sat there with a smile behind which I could now clearly see the calculation. I won that round. Small, invisible, but a round. Later, after the kids were in bed, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. My hands were shaking, fine, barely visible tremors. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles went white. Everything I hadn't shown at dinner, all of it was here inside. Rage, fear, disgust, and something new. Something I didn't recognize right away because I hadn't felt it in a very long time. Certainty. He had thrown his best at me, and I'd held, not because I was strong, but because I finally knew who I was playing against. The call from my mother came on a Tuesday, around noon. I was sitting at my desk, eating a salad and reviewing ventilation specs for the courthouse. A regular day. One of those days I now lived as a double agent, an architect on the surface, a sapper in a minefield underneath. The phone rang, Mom on the screen. We usually talked on Sundays. Tuesday was not Sunday. Hi, Mom. Rachel, I need to talk to you. My mother's voice comes in 4 types. Normal when she's talking about the neighbors. Happy when Ben calls her on his own. Dry when she's offended, and this, anxious, careful like she was choosing each word. Mark called me. I set down my fork. Salad, specs, ventilation all ceased to exist. He called you? Last night. We talked for almost 20 minutes. Rachel, he's very worried about you, he said. She hesitated. He said you haven't been yourself lately, that you've been snapping at the kids. That he's offered you help and you keep refusing. 20 minutes. He talked to my mother for 20 minutes, pouring his version into her. Word by word, brick by brick, the same way he built everything else. Methodically. What exactly did he say? That you yell, that you have mood swings, that he's worried about the children. Her voice dropped. Rachel, he cried, I've known him 18 years, he never cries. Of course he cried. A corporate lawyer who wins multi-million-dollar negotiations. Of course he knows when to cry. Mom, listen to me carefully. He said you'd deny it, that it's part of the pattern. I closed my eyes. There it was. The most elegant part of his construction. Build into the foundation the idea that any denial from the victim is just more evidence of her illness. I deny, I lack self-awareness. I get angry, I'm unstable. I stay calm, I'm suppressing. No way out. Every reaction I have works for him, or so he thinks. Mom, I said, I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you not to take anyone's side right now. Can you do that? A long pause. I could hear her breathing. Rachel, I'm your mother. I'm always on your side. But he was so convincing. He gave specific things, dates, incidents. He said that in November you screamed at Sophie until she cried. Is that true, November? The school play, Mark was 40 minutes late. Sophie had been waiting for him backstage, he'd promised to be there. By the time he showed up, the play was over. I snapped. Not at Sophie, at Mark, in front of Sophie. And yes, Sophie cried. Not because of my yelling, because her dad didn't come. But in Mark's version, there's no context. There's only, Rachel screamed, the child cried. Mom, this isn't a phone conversation. I'll come to you Saturday. Without Mark, without the kids. And I'll tell you everything. But I need you to not call him before Saturday. And not discuss our conversation with Dad. Can you do that? Another pause. I could hear her thinking. My mother, a retired schoolteacher. She believes in rules, order, and the idea that people in nice suits tell the truth. For 18 years, she'd considered Mark the perfect son-in-law. He remembered her birthdays, called on holidays, came over to fix the faucet, 18 years of investment, and now he was collecting the dividends. All right, she said, Saturday, but Rachel, if you really do need help, please don't push it away. I hung up and sat for a minute, 5, staring at the ventilation specks, which had turned into a blur because my eyes were wet. Not from weakness, from rage. He'd gone to my mother. The one person I could have called that first night and told everything. He'd cut me off from her before I had the chance. But he'd made a mistake. A small one, like all his mistakes. He'd called too early, too confidently. My mother was worried, but she wasn't convinced. Not yet. Saturday. I had until Saturday. I called Ellen. He's reaching out to my family. Names, dates, content, everything your mother relayed. Write it down today while it's fresh. Is this legal? Calling your mother-in-law and expressing concern. Completely legal and completely calculated. He's building a network of witnesses. People who'll say in court, yes, Mark came to me, he was very concerned. Your mother, his parents, possibly mutual friends. That's the next phase. The next phase, as though we were discussing a chess match, not my life. What do I do Saturday? Tell her everything? Ellen paused. Your mother, yes, she needs to know, but carefully. Don't play her the voicemail yet. Start with facts. The pattern, show her your notebook. Another pause. Your mother isn't a judge. She doesn't need evidence. She needs to see that you're of sound mind and acting rationally. That's the best rebuttal to everything your husband said. I wrote it all in my notebook. By now, I had 12 pages. Dates, facts, observations, not a single emotion, just lines on a blueprint. That evening, I came home. Mark sat in the living room watching the news. The camera on the shelf hummed quietly. He turned and smiled. How was your day? Long, Mom called. I said it on purpose, watched his face. Not a single muscle moved. Oh, how is she? Fine. Wants me to come by Saturday. Good idea. You need a break from the routine. You need a break, again. Every word of his, another small brick in the wall he was building around me. Caring husband. Tired wife. I nodded and went to the kitchen. Took the chicken out of the fridge. Started cutting vegetables. The knife struck the board in a steady rhythm. Saturday. Mom, the truth, 4 more days. My mother lives 40 minutes away in the small house where I grew up. Yellow siding, red door, 2 maples in the front yard. I parked and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the house. The last time I'd come here, I was a different person. 3 weeks ago, a whole lifetime. Mom opened the door before I knocked. She'd been waiting. I could see it in her face, worry she was trying to hide behind the usual bustle. She hugged me a little tighter and a little longer than usual. Coffee? Yes, strong. We sat in the kitchen. The same table where I'd done homework in 10th grade, same light from the window. Mom placed her hands on the table, one on top of the other. Waiting, I opened my bag, took out the notebook, set it in front of me. Mom, I'm going to tell you what I know, not what I feel, what I know, facts. I need you to listen until the end. Can you do that? She nodded. And I began. I told her about the voicemail. Didn't play it, Ellen had advised, keeping the recording closed for now. But I recounted it word for word. Ironclad, full custody. She's unstable and I can prove it. Documenting for over a year. Mom listened. At first, with the expression of my daughter is wrong. Then, with the expression of my daughter couldn't make this up, I watched her face change, watched the stages pass through her. It was cruel making a 67-year-old woman reconsider 18 years. But I had no choice. I showed her the notebook, 7 episodes. The pattern: provocation, reaction, documentation. The camera in the living room, the phone call to her as part of the strategy. Mom, when he called you, he wasn't worried. He was building a case. You're a witness in his plan. He wants you to tell a judge someday. Yes, I also noticed something was wrong with Rachel. She was quiet for a long time. The coffee went cold. Outside, a neighbor was mowing his lawn. A normal Saturday sound in a normal Saturday world where husbands don't plan the destruction of their wives in bullet points. I don't, she started, then stopped. Took a sip of coffee, started again. I don't want to believe this, Rachel. I didn't either. But he cried. He cried on the phone. Mom, he's a corporate lawyer. He negotiates multi-million-dollar deals. He knows when to cry. She closed her eyes, and in that moment, something shifted. Not all the way, my mother isn't the kind of person who changes her mind in an hour. But a crack appeared. In the right place. Then she opened her eyes and said, Ben's birthday. What? Ben's birthday, in March. I came over early to help set up. Remember, you were at work. Mark was home. I remembered. March, Ben's birthday, pirate theme. I'd ordered a cake shaped like a ship and spent the whole week worrying that the mast would collapse. I walked into the kitchen, and Mark was on the phone. He didn't hear me come in. I wasn't eavesdropping, Rachel. I was just standing in the hallway with grocery bags. She paused, ran her finger along the rim of her cup. He said something like, I don't remember exactly. No, it's too early. We need to wait. Let her show it herself. And then something about by fall there should be enough. By fall, March is 6 months before fall. Fall is now. He'd been planning this since at least March. Not 1 year, 18 months. Maybe longer. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Because I thought he was talking about work. A client, some case. It sounded professional. And then he saw me, smiled, helped me with the bags, and I forgot. I really forgot, Rachel. Until this very minute. She was crying, quietly dabbing her eyes with her fingertips. My mother, who'd believed she'd married off her daughter to the best son-in-law in the world. My mother, who every Christmas put Mark's photo on the mantel next to mine. I stood up, walked around the table, and put my arms around her. We sat like that for a minute, maybe 2. Then she straightened, blew her nose in a napkin, and looked at me. And what I saw in her eyes was not what I'd expected. Not pity, not confusion, anger, quiet schoolteacher anger. The kind that used to silence an entire classroom. What do you need from me? 4 words. The most important ones I'd heard in 3 weeks. I need you on my side, not just in words. If he calls again, listen, don't argue, don't let on that you know. Let him think you're with him, and write down everything he says. Date, time, exact words. Mom nodded. Then she stood, pulled a notebook from the kitchen drawer. Small, graph-ruled, with the school district logo on the cover. She sat back down and wrote at the top, Mark's calls, the date, the time, and began recording yesterday's conversation from memory. I watched her, my mother, 67 years old, a graph paper notebook, a pen with blue ink, and the steel gaze of a schoolteacher who has caught someone lying. 2 notebooks now, mine and hers, 2 blueprints of the same building. Mark thought he was building a wall around me, but walls can be built from both sides. I got home from my mother's around 7. The drive back felt shorter, probably because for the first time in 3 weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. In the car, I even turned on the radio. Didn't listen, just wanted a normal sound. Not the quiet, not my own thoughts, not Mark's voice in my head. The house was still. Ben was already asleep. Mark had texted that he'd put him down at 8. Sophie was in her room with her headphones on, watching something. I peeked in, she waved without looking up. Normal, Mark was in the bedroom. I could hear him brushing his teeth. "How's your mom?" he called from the bathroom. "Good. Helped with the garden, I'm beat. You need a day off from your days off." I didn't answer. Changed, got into bed. He came out of the bathroom, lay down, turned on his phone. As always, the screen glowed white on his face. What was he reading? Who was he texting? His lawyer? I lay there and breathed evenly. After 10 minutes, he set down the phone and turned on his side. 5 minutes later, he was asleep. I lay awake another hour, maybe 2, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what my mother had said. By fall, there should be enough. Fall, it was October now. His deadlines were approaching. Not mine, his. He had planned to act this fall. Something was slowing him down. Maybe my new calm demeanor. Maybe his lawyer said the material wasn't sufficient yet. But he wouldn't stop. People who draft plans like these don't stop. Around midnight, I went down to the kitchen for water. Didn't turn on the light. I know this house by heart, every step, every corner. Poured a glass, stood by the window. The yard, the streetlight, the neighbor's fence, an ordinary night. Then the light switch clicked behind me. I flinched. Turned around. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway. Pajama pants, a t-shirt, barefoot, hair sticking up in every direction but his eyes clear. He hadn't been sleeping. "Mom, can we talk?" 16 years old, already taller than me. But in that moment, barefoot on the cold tile, he looked 12. "Of course. What's going on?" He sat at the table. I sat across from him. Between us, the cutting board I'd forgotten to put away, a lighthouse-shaped salt shaker, a napkin holder. Ordinary kitchen things, an ordinary kitchen, nothing ordinary about any of it. Ethan was quiet for 20 seconds, long seconds. He looked at his hands, then at me, then at his hands again. "Mom, I know what Dad is doing." 4 words. Every person in my life seemed to have the right 4 words. My mother's were, "What do you need from me?" Ethan's were these, direct, no preamble, "My son." "What do you mean?" I tried to keep my voice steady. I've heard him on the phone multiple times. The first time was back in the summer. I came home early from practice. He didn't know I was there. He was in his office with the door closed, but I could hear through the wall. "He was talking about you, about custody." He paused. I didn't know that word then, looked it up after. A 16-year-old boy Googling the word custody after accidentally overhearing his father. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hold him and never let go. I wanted to go upstairs and wake Mark and tell him, "You didn't just break us, you broke him." A boy who a year ago still argued with us about bedtime. "Why didn't you tell me?" Because I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was about work. Maybe custody was some legal thing for his clients. His voice dipped. "I wanted it to be about work, Mom. I really did." His voice cracked once. He straightened it out immediately. And in that gesture, I recognized myself. The version of me who'd spent 3 weeks pushing everything down so the camera would see a calm woman. And then there was more. In September. He was on the phone in the car, driving me to school. Thought I had my earbuds in. I did have them in, but the music wasn't playing. He told someone. Ethan swallowed. "The behavior over the past month has been stable, but I have video recordings of previous incidents. That should be enough." Video recordings of previous incidents. The camera. My breakdowns. All documented, filed, ready for submission. I knew this already. But hearing it from my child, from a child who sat in the car next to his father and listened as he planned, that was a different level of pain. A lower frequency, deeper. "Ethan, you said you have a recording?" He looked at me, surprised. "I didn't say that you didn't, but you're my son, I know you." He was quiet. Then pulled his phone from the pocket of his pajama pants. Opened the voice recorder app, tapped on a file. Date, September 23rd. "Don't play it," I said. "What?" "Don't play it now, I'll listen later, not here," he nodded, put the phone away. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. A big hand, almost a man's. With an ink stain on the index finger, he's always drawing something in the margins of his notebooks. "Ethan, listen to me. What you did, you did the right thing. But now I need you to do something hard. I need you to act normal. With Dad, same as always. Not colder, not warmer. Can you do that?" "Mom, I've been doing that for months." Months. My 16-year-old son had been living with this knowledge alone for months. Pretending at family dinners for months. Watching his father kiss his mother on the top of the head for months, knowing it was a performance. "You shouldn't have had to carry this alone," I said quietly. "Neither should you." He looked me straight in the eyes. "Mom, do you have a plan?" "Yes." "A good one?" "Getting better." He nodded, stood up. Walked to the sink, poured himself water, drank. Set the glass down, turned. "Mom, I'm on your side, you know that, right?" "I know." He went upstairs. Quiet footsteps on the staircase. A door creaking shut, the refrigerator humming in the dark. I sat at the kitchen table and cried. For the first time in weeks, truly, without control, without a camera, without strategy. Not from fear and not from anger. But because my son, my boy, who should still be thinking about girls and exams and what car he wants for graduation. My son had been a soldier in a war I didn't even know was happening. For months, then I wiped my face, drank some water, and took out my notebook, new page, Ethan's recording, September 23. Listen at Ellen's, discuss legal status of a minor's recording, 3 fronts, lawyer, mother, son. Against one man with a perfect haircut and a plan that accounted for everything. Everything except the fact that his family knows how to build too. Monday morning, I took the day off. Told the office, personal matters. Told Mark, dentist, then a meeting with a tile supplier for the courthouse. He nodded without a follow-up question. Wife goes to the dentist. Normal, stable, nothing suspicious. I arrived at Ellen's at 10. With me, my notebook, Ethan's phone with the recording, and a printout of my mother's notes. Over the weekend, Mom had remembered something else. Mark had called her not once. The first call was the one she'd told me about. But there'd been another, earlier in August. She wrote it down from memory. He'd asked whether Rachel had ever had episodes as a child, emotional problems, issues with control. Mom said no, never. He thanked her and asked her not to mention the call. "I don't want Rachel to think I'm prying." At the time, Mom thought how caring, in her notebook now, building a case. Ellen laid everything out on her desk. My notebook. Mom's notebook, Ethan's phone, the voicemail, which I'd by then saved in 3 places as she'd instructed. She listened to Ethan's recording without expression. 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Mark's voice muffled through the car wall but audible. It contained what Ethan had relayed, the video recordings, the incidents, but there was more. A sentence Ethan hadn't mentioned, probably because he didn't fully understand it. "Her business is the main problem. As long as she has the firm, the court won't see dependence on me. We need to address that." My firm. He wanted to undermine my firm. 12 years I'd built it, 12 people who trust me, 3 federal contracts, all of it a problem he planned to address. Ellen took off her glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. I was beginning to understand. This was her gesture before important words. "Rachel, I'll be direct. We're in a strong position. Not perfect, but significantly better than 3 weeks ago." She walked me through it. The voicemail, evidence of intent and strategy. The camera, evidence of surveillance. Ethan's recording, confirmation of long-term planning. My mother's testimony, evidence of manipulation of extended family. Together, it painted a picture no family court judge could ignore. "But there are nuances," she said. "Ethan's recording. He's 16. Our state is one-party consent, so he had the legal right to record a conversation he was part of or at least present for. The recording is admissible. She paused. But the other side will attack from a different angle. Your husband will claim you recruited your child into the conflict, turned him against his father. That's a standard counterargument, and it works. I didn't recruit him. He came to me on his own. I know, and will prove that, but be ready, it'll be one of their swings. She closed the folder, looked at me. Rachel, I think it's time. Time to file first. The clock on the wall ticked twice. Outside, wind bent a branch. Its shadow slid across the wall. Small details you notice when time slows down. If we wait, Ellen continued, he acts. His plan is designed for this fall. We don't know the exact date, but he's clearly close to filing. If he files first, the narrative is his. Concerned father forced to protect children from an unstable mother. The judge gets his version first. We play defense. And if we file first, the narrative shifts. Wife discovered that her husband was secretly preparing a custody battle. Husband installed covert surveillance, provoked emotional reactions, manipulated extended family. We're not the victim reacting. We're the party that acts. I thought about Ben, about his spontaneous hugs, about Sophie, who knew nothing or maybe knew in her own quiet way, about Ethan, who had carried this alone for months. I thought about how their lives would change once the word divorce was spoken out loud. What exactly happens? I asked. We file the petition. Simultaneously, we submit a motion to preserve all surveillance footage so he can't delete anything. We also request a protective order regarding the camera and any recording devices in the home. Ellen leaned forward. This is important. His recordings, the ones he made to prove your instability, they now become evidence of his surveillance. His weapon becomes yours. He'll find out that same day. He'll be formally served. Yes, formally served. Mark will receive an envelope or a call from his lawyer. And in that second, he'll understand that a pocket dial 3 weeks ago, 4 minutes and 11 seconds of accidental recording, destroyed everything he'd been building for 18 months. I pictured his face. For the first time in 18 years, without the mask, without control, without a plan. It wasn't satisfying, it was necessary. When? I asked. I can have the documents ready by Wednesday, filing Thursday or Friday. You need to decide by tomorrow. I don't need until tomorrow. Ellen raised an eyebrow. I don't need to think, I said. I've been thinking for 3 weeks. I was thinking on a concrete floor when my world collapsed. I was thinking while lying next to a man who's planning to take my children. I was thinking when my 16-year-old son sat across from me at midnight in the kitchen and told me he'd been pretending for months. I've done enough thinking. File, Ellen smiled, just slightly, the first time in all our meetings. All right, Thursday. I left her office at 11:30. The parking lot was sunny, an ordinary October day. I sat in the car for a minute, just breathing. No tears, no shaking, just breath. Thursday. In 3 days, Mark would learn that the foundation he'd been laying for 18 months had cracked. Not from time, from a blueprint that turned out to be better than his. I started the car and drove to the site. The courthouse was waiting. 4th floor, walls, rebar, work, my work, the thing he'd planned to address. All right, Mark, address this. Wednesday. The last day my house was still my house. I didn't know it for certain, but I felt it. The way you feel when a building has stood its time. Nothing visible, no cracks, no settling, but something in the air, something in the way the floor creaks. I picked up Ben from school. He told me about the turtle they brought to class. Its name was Captain and it ate strawberries. He talked about it as though it were the most important event in human history. And I listened, truly listened. Not the way I'd been listening for 3 weeks, one ear on him, the other scanning for danger. All of me. Every word about Captain and strawberries. Because tomorrow my son would come home from school to a different life. He didn't know yet. None of them did except Ethan. And even Ethan didn't know about Thursday. At home, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I made lasagna. Not from a box, real lasagna, with homemade sauce and 3 kinds of cheese, the way I used to make in the early years of our marriage, when I had the time and the desire. Ben climbed onto a stool and helped grate cheese. Half of it ended up on the floor. I didn't get angry. I laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. And the camera in the living room probably caught it. Good. Let the judge see a mother laughing with her son. Sophie wandered out of her room, drawn by the smell. She stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, an exact copy of Mark when he's observing. You're making lasagna, like real lasagna. Like real lasagna. What happened? 13 years old. Old enough to know that when mom makes lasagna on a Wednesday, something is either wrong or too right. Nothing happened. I just felt like it. Sophie watched me for another second, then shrugged, sat at the table, and started telling me about a friend who'd gotten into a fight with another friend over a boy, and how the whole school was debating who was right. The ordinary life of a 13-year-old girl. Ordinary problems. I listened and thought, remember this. This evening, this voice, this smell, remember it because tomorrow everything becomes different. Ethan came down for dinner. Looked at me, a quick, sharp glance. I shook my head, barely perceptibly. Not now, he understood. Sat down, took a plate, started eating. A normal teenager, a normal dinner. Mark came home at 7, saw the lasagna, raised his eyebrows. Wow. What's the occasion? Wednesday, I said. Wednesday's the occasion. He smirked, sat down, took a big helping. Ate quietly, then mentioned a colleague who'd bought a boat and now regretted it. Ben laughed. Sophie rolled her eyes. Ethan poked at his salad. A normal family, a normal dinner. From the outside, a commercial. Happy people around a table, lamplight, steam rising from the food. Nobody sees the camera on the shelf. Nobody sees the notebooks in the bags. Nobody hears the timer ticking. After dinner, Ben asked me to help with his solar system project. We sat on the floor of his room and glued Jupiter out of papier-mâché. It wasn't going well, the planet came out lopsided, more potato than gas giant. Ben was cracking up. So was I, Mom, can Jupiter actually be crooked? In our solar system, absolutely. He looked at me seriously. This is a good solar system, Mom, 9 years old. He was talking about planets, but I heard something else. And I very much hoped he was right. Sophie appeared in the doorway and announced that we were doing everything wrong and that the proportions were completely off scale. Then she sat down next to us and started rebuilding Saturn. Within 10 minutes, all 3 of us were on the floor, covered in newspaper strips and glue, arguing about what color Neptune should be. Blue, said Sophie. Dark blue, said Ben. Cold, I said. Ethan walked past the open door, stopped, looked at us. I caught his eye. He knew, I knew that he knew, and in his eyes was something I will never forget, not fear, not anger, gratitude. Forgiving them this evening. The last evening when it was still possible to pretend that everything was fine. By 11, everyone was asleep. Mark was reading something on his tablet. I lay beside him, looking at his hands. Long fingers, neat nails, a wedding band. Hands that had trembled 18 years ago when he put the ring on my finger. Hands that had held each of our children in their first minutes of life. Hands that had signed the retainer check to a lawyer to take those children from me. I wanted to ask, when did you decide? Was there a specific day, a specific moment, when you looked at me and thought, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to take everything from her? Or did it build slowly, like a crack you never fix? Like a foundation that settles millimeter by millimeter until one day the wall can't hold. I used to think I would never feel grief for this marriage. I was wrong. Not grief for Mark, for the 18 years. For the woman who laughed too loud and thought it was love. For the Sunday mornings and the pirate-themed birthday cakes and all the ordinary days that were, at least for me, real. But I didn't ask. I wouldn't ask, not because I was afraid, because the answer didn't matter. Architects don't ask a building why it's collapsing. They read the blueprints, find the error, and build again. Tomorrow. My phone glowed faintly on the nightstand. The last message from Ellen, received an hour ago. Documents ready, filing tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll call you after. I closed my eyes, tried to memorize this moment. The quiet, Mark's breathing beside me, the house settling, the hallway clock ticking. The last night of this marriage, not the last night in this house. I wasn't going anywhere. The house was mine. The kids were mine. The life was mine, just the person next to me, not anymore. Thursday, 6:40 p.m. I stood at the kitchen counter, slicing tomatoes, not because I needed tomatoes, because I needed something for my hands to do. The kids were upstairs, Ben doing homework, Sophie in her headphones, Ethan behind his closed door. An ordinary evening, the last ordinary evening. Ellen had called at 2 in the afternoon, filed, notifications sent to his office. He'll receive it today. I said thank you and hung up, then went to the bathroom and threw up, not from fear. From the finality of it, no road back. The rest of the day I spent on site, checking weld joints on the 3rd floor, running load calculations, talking to the foreman about deadlines, a normal workday, hands steady, voice steady. I surprised myself. Then I understood. 3 weeks of training, 3 weeks of living next to a man who wants to destroy you while smiling for a camera. After that, a normal workday is nothing. Picked up Ben at 5, tomatoes at 6. At 6:30, I heard the car pull up. Engine cutting off. Car door, a single, flat thud. Footsteps on the front path, key in the lock. He came in. I didn't turn around right away, kept slicing. Listened as he set down his briefcase. Took off his shoes. Hung his coat on the hook by the door. Every sound separate, vivid, as if someone had turned the volume all the way up. Then nothing. He stood in the hallway and didn't move forward. Mark always moved forward. Always. Briefcase, shoes, coat, kitchen, 4 steps. 18 years. And now, on the 4th step, a pause. I set down the knife. Dried my hands on the towel. Slowly, turned around. He stood in the doorway between the hallway and the kitchen. Tie loosened. Top button undone. His face, I had known this face for 18 years and had never seen on it what I saw now. Not anger, not fear. Something in between. Like a man who arrives at a site and discovers that the building he'd been planning is already standing. Built by someone else. We looked at each other. 5 seconds. 10. The camera on the living room shelf was recording, but the living room was behind him and we stood in the kitchen. Out of frame. As though even the house knew this conversation wasn't for the record. He walked to the sink, took a glass from the cabinet, filled it, drank, set it down. Then pulled out a chair and sat, not in his usual seat, the nearest one, like a guest. Like someone who had never been in this house before. Then he spoke. You know, not a question, not what are these documents. Not my lawyer called, not we need to talk. 2 words, a statement, he'd understood. The instant he received the papers, he'd understood everything, the voicemail, the 3 weeks of calm, the reason Hurricane Rachel had suddenly gone quiet. Yes, I said. I know, the refrigerator hummed. Upstairs, Ben dropped something, a muffled thud, then nothing. We both looked up, simultaneously, instinctively, like parents. The last synchronized gesture, a long pause. He rubbed his thumb along the edge of the glass, back and forth. I watched his hand and waited. The voicemail, he said finally. Not a question, a statement. The voicemail. When? 3 weeks ago, Tuesday, you accidentally dialed my number. Pocket dial, 4 minutes. I heard everything. He closed his eyes, 1 second. A corporate lawyer who controls every muscle in his face, and then this 1 second. The only second when I saw the real him, not Mark the husband, not Mark the strategist. Just a man who realized he'd lost and was trying to absorb it. Then he opened his eyes, and Mark was back. Rachel, I can explain. No. Listen, no, Mark, not today, not to me. You have a lawyer, talk to him. I have a lawyer, she'll talk to yours. Everything that needs to be said will be said through them. He was looking at me. I could see the machinery working behind his eyes, running calculations, searching for leverage, habit, professional reflex. He couldn't help it. You don't understand the context, he said. His voice softened. That voice, the one he used when he said Hurricane Rachel with a smile. I was scared for the kids, for you. I was looking for advice, not Mark. I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. You installed a camera in the living room to record my breakdowns. You called my mother and told her I was unstable. You provoked me in front of the children and documented my reactions. You discussed with a lawyer how to take full custody of my kids, and you're telling me about context. Not a single decibel above normal. And that was scarier than any scream. I could see it on his face. He knew how to handle Hurricane Rachel. He'd prepared for her for 18 months. But this Rachel, quiet, precise, with a notebook and a lawyer, this one he hadn't accounted for. The clock ticked in the hallway. Upstairs, Sophie turned on music, muffled bass through the ceiling. I want to see the kids, he said. You'll see them through the court. Rachel, you can stay in the house tonight. The bedroom upstairs is yours. I'll sleep in the office. Starting tomorrow, the court decides. My lawyer has filed a motion to preserve all surveillance footage. I'd recommend you don't touch the camera. He stood, slowly. The chair scraped against the floor. He stood 2 meters away from me, and for the first time I saw him whole. Without the filter, without 18 years of habit. Just a 46-year-old man in an expensive suit who had spent 18 months building a trap and walked into someone else's. You've changed, he said quietly. No, I just stopped looking up. He went upstairs. I listened to his footsteps. The bedroom door closed. A soft click. I stood in the kitchen. The tomatoes sat on the cutting board, half sliced. The knife gleamed under the lamp. Outside the window, darkness was settling in. An ordinary October evening. Only everything different. My phone buzzed. Ellen, how did it go? I wrote. Clean, no yelling, no scene. He knows. 10 seconds later, good, now the real work begins. I put the phone away, looked at the camera in the living room, the small white lens, still recording. I walked over, stood directly in front of it. Didn't smile, didn't cry. Just looked. For 3 weeks, this camera had filmed a woman playing a role. Now let it film a woman who'd stopped. Friday started wrong. Not wrong the way a broken pipe is wrong or a burnt breakfast is wrong. Wrong the way silence is wrong when it replaces something that used to be there. At 7 in the morning, the house should have been full of sounds, Mark's footsteps, the bathroom door, the smell of coffee he always made first. Instead, nothing. I woke up in my office, on the couch that turned out to be harder than I'd thought. My back ached. My eyes were dry. I hadn't cried during the night. I hadn't slept either. Just lay there, listening to the house. Every creak, every sigh of the pipes. The way an engineer listens to a building after an earthquake, checking what still holds. I got up, dressed, went downstairs. The bedroom door was closed. In the kitchen, I made oatmeal, waffles, coffee. Like every morning. Because the kids would be awake in 20 minutes, and they needed a normal world, even if only for 20 minutes. Ben came down first. Sleepy, in his dinosaur pajamas, a pillow crease on his cheek. Sat at the table. Started eating. Sophie 5 minutes later, already together, backpack on, ready for school, Ethan last. He looked at me. I nodded. Barely. Then footsteps from above, slow, heavy. Mark came down the stairs with a suitcase. Not a big one, medium, black on wheels. The one he took on business trips. I'd seen that suitcase 100 times in the hallway by the door. But now it sounded different. Wheels on the steps, thud, thud, thud like a countdown. Ben looked up from his waffles. Sophie stopped chewing. Ethan set down his spoon. Mark stopped in the kitchen doorway, dressed for work, suit, tie, everything immaculate. But his eyes, the eyes were different. I saw something in them I hadn't expected. Not anger, not calculation, confusion, real confusion. Brief, he hid it within a second, but I caught it. "Kids," he said, "I need to tell you something." Steady voice, controlled. His courtroom voice, but aimed at 3 children sitting at the kitchen table, and because of that, monstrous. "Mom," Sophie turned to me, eyes wide. "Dad needs to live somewhere else for a while," I said, my voice, my words. I didn't let him deliver his version first. "Dad and I are working through some adult things. It has nothing to do with you. You haven't done anything wrong, and we both love you." Phrases that every parent in the world says. I'd heard them in movies, read them in books, and always thought how empty, how scripted. Then you stand in your own kitchen, looking at your own children, and you realize there are no other words. Because the right words for this don't exist. There are only the ones that cause the least damage. Sophie froze. No tears, no outburst. She just froze like a photograph, 13 years old, her father's temperament. Processing. I could see her mind working the same way Mark's does, only maybe more honestly. Ethan sat motionless, staring at his plate. He'd known for a long time, but knowing is one thing, seeing a suitcase in the hallway is another. And Ben looked at the suitcase, then at Mark, then at me. "Dad, are you coming back tomorrow?" The refrigerator hummed. The clock in the hallway ticked, and between those two sounds, nothing. Just the question hanging in the air. There are things you can't prepare for. You can have a lawyer, a notebook, 3 copies of a voicemail, a 12-point plan. You can spend 3 weeks rehearsing calm in front of a camera. But the voice of a 9-year-old boy asking, "Are you coming back tomorrow?" There's no preparation for that. I gripped the edge of the counter. Then Ben added, "Like Captain," Mark blinked. "Who?" "The turtle at school. She lives in the tank, and then someone takes her home on weekends." Like Captain, Mark looked at me, for the first time that morning. And in that look there was no strategy. No lawyer, no plan, no ironclad. Just a man who'd heard his son compare him to a turtle and didn't know what to say. "Something like that," he said. He hugged Ben, hugged Sophie, who stood stiff and didn't hug back, walked to Ethan. Ethan stood, they looked at each other. Mark extended his hand. Ethan shook it, didn't hug, shook his hand like an adult, like a man who had already chosen his side. Mark picked up the suitcase, opened the front door, turned around. "Rachel, through the lawyers, Mark," he nodded, stepped out. The door closed, wheels on the walkway, engine. Then the house settled into the kind of quiet that follows when something large has been removed. Ben went back to his waffles. Sophie went upstairs. A minute later, I heard her crying softly into her pillow, the way I'd cried that first week. I wanted to go to her, but Ethan shook his head. "Give her a minute, she needs to be alone." 16 years old. Where did he learn that? I stood at the window and watched Mark's car back out of the driveway. Then I washed the dishes. Then I drove the kids to school. Then there was another day, and another, and another. There's a concept in architecture called the period of settlement. When a new building is still moving, finding its balance, adjusting to its own weight. The foundation settles by fractions of an inch. Walls shift ever so slightly. Doors that used to close perfectly start catching on the floor. Eventually, everything finds its place. But it takes time, 3 months. Our settlement took 3 months. In the first weeks, the house felt strange. Too quiet, too spacious. 5 people had lived in it for 18 years, and now a wall had been removed, not physically, but you could feel it. The empty seat at the table. The empty coat hook. The empty side of the bed, which I'd moved back to from the office couch because it was my bed and my house. Ben adapted first. Children his age are like water. They take the shape of the new container as long as the container feels safe. He spent weekends at Mark's, came back and told me that Dad's apartment was small, but it had a balcony and you could see the parking lot, and once he watched a tow truck take someone's car. For him, it was an adventure. Eventually, he stopped reporting on Dad's apartment, not out of resentment. It just stopped being news. Sophie, she was harder, the first 3 weeks silence. Icy, absolute, aimed at me. Not at Mark, at me. Because I had destroyed the family, because I had filed. Because Dad cried when he left and I didn't. 13 years old, her father's temperament. She chose his side without asking questions. Then, in the 4th week, Mark forgot to pick her up from practice. Just forgot. The way he used to forget with me, parent-teacher nights, school plays, promises. Only now I wasn't there to cover. Sophie waited 40 minutes in an empty parking lot. Called me. I got there in 15 minutes. She got in the car without a word. We drove 3 blocks in silence. Then she said, "He always did this, didn't he? Forgot and you covered for him. Not always, but often. Why didn't you say anything?" Because I loved him. Because I thought it was normal. Because Hurricane Rachel yelled about the small things but stayed silent about the ones that mattered. Because I didn't see it, I said. Sophie nodded. That was the last time we talked about it directly. But the next day, she came into the kitchen and sat in the chair next to mine. Not across from me, next to me, a small gesture. And it said more than any conversation could have. Ethan, my soldier. My 16-year-old man who'd carried someone else's secret for months. He gave his account. Not in court, at Ellen's office, on the record, with an independent psychologist present. He described his father's phone calls. The recording, the months of pretending. He spoke evenly, calmly. His voice broke only once when they asked if he loved his father. He said, "Yes, but I don't trust him." 16 years old. No child should ever have to say that sentence. The court proceedings, I won't go into detail. That's a separate story, and it isn't finished yet. I'll only say this. The camera that Mark installed for security recorded 4 weeks of a calm, patient, loving mother. Not a single outburst, not a single raised voice, not a single incident. His own footage became my best evidence. Ellen was right, the trap closed on the one who said it. Mark was granted visitation, not full custody, not joint custody. Visitation on a schedule, like Captain, the turtle who gets taken home on weekends, and me. I finished the courthouse. On time, not a single day of delay. Jim Henderson, the same client Mark had tried to use against me, sent a bottle of wine and a note. Best project in 5 years. He didn't know the context. Didn't know I'd built it alongside the demolition of my own life. He just saw the result. The camera came down the day after the court ruling, small white box. I held it in my hand and thought about how it weighed almost nothing. Strange that something so light could cause so much destruction. Or, looked at another way, help you build something new. I didn't throw it away. It sits in a drawer in my office desk, not as a reminder, as an artifact, a component from a project that failed. Architects keep things like that. We learn from them. On the shelf where the camera used to sit, there's now a lopsided Jupiter made of papier-mâché. Next to it, Saturn with cardboard rings. Next to that, Neptune, not blue, not dark blue. Cold, our solar system. Crooked, out of proportion, covered in newspaper strips and dried glue. Ben has been sent to the principal's office twice since then for talking in class. Sophie put a lock on her bedroom door and paints her nails black. Ethan applied to a summer architecture program. I found out from his teacher, not from him. He didn't tell me, but he chose architecture. A perfect solar system? No, but ours, and it holds. Some evenings, when the kids are upstairs and the house goes quiet, I sit in the kitchen with a glass of wine and a notebook. Not that notebook, I don't use that one anymore. A new one, clean. It's full of sketches, not buildings. Just lines, shapes, ideas. I draw without purpose, without a project, just because I can. And I think about buildings, about how the best ones aren't the ones that are beautiful. They're the ones that stand. The ones that bear the load, the wind, the time. The ones that go through settlement and find their balance. I'm standing, not perfectly, with cracks, with a crooked papier-mâché Jupiter on the shelf, but I'm standing.